Whenever I do research for videos, I always look into opposing viewpoints to make sure that I'm not just existing in an echo chamber. Well, this research often leads me to some wild places, one of which is conservative nonprofit and infamous YouTube channel PragerU. Now, if you've been on YouTube for any amount of time, you've probably seen a PragerU ad or watched a video essay debunking or responding to one of their videos. And if you've seen anything from them or about them, then you know that some of their views are a little, odd. The video that I want to talk about today is titled How to Get Kids to Listen, and it stars psychologist John Rosemond, who talks about how to get kids to listen. Now, I want to talk about this video because Rosemond's parenting advice, the parenting advice that PragerU advocates for, is legitimately absolutely f***ing bonkers. So, let's talk about it. Before I get into things, I want to give a quick content warning for discussions of abuse. There's nothing explicit, but I am going to discuss the mistreatment of children by their caregivers, so if that's a sensitive topic for you, then you might want to skip this one. Like I mentioned earlier, I ran across this particular PragerU video while I was looking into opposing viewpoints for my grading video, link in the description. How to Get Kids to Listen is a 5-minute lesson on how you, as a parent, can get your children to obey you. This video bases its entire premise on the assumption that obedient children are happy children.
When was the last time you heard a child referred to as obedient? It's probably been a while. That's too bad, because the best research tells us that obedient children are happy children.
The speaker, John Rosemond, tells parents that the way to get obedient children is to give them commands and never explain why you're telling, not asking, them to do something.
Explanations invite arguments. Whenever parents tell me they're dealing with an argumentative child, I know that these well-intentioned people are explaining themselves. They tell their child why they want him to pick up his toys, for example, and he argues, because you can always pick apart an explanation.
And he even says that you should never bend down to get on your child's level when you talk to them, because that makes it look like you have no confidence, like you're bowing down to your child.
Bending down to a child's level does not look authoritative. It looks, in fact, like you're one movement away from being down on your knees in front of a king. I know you've read somewhere that you should get down to a child's level when you talk to him. All I can tell you is that there's a lot of really bad parenting advice.
And the more we look at the assumptions underlying this advice, the more nefarious it gets. See, according to John, parenting should be about establishing authority and not giving the child any room to question things, because you aren't trying to maintain a relationship with your child as equals who respect one another. You're trying to get them to obey you, because remember, obedient children are happy children. When I was watching this video, I kept coming back to that claim, obedient children are happy children. He said it with such authority, like it was some well-established fact. Now, I'd never heard it, but I was willing to keep an open mind, so I decided to look into it. One nice thing about PragerU is that in their video descriptions, they always have a link to their website, which has a transcript and a list of sources for each video. So I went to their site, followed the links, and for one of them the link was broken, and I had to do some reverse engineering to even figure out what the article was, but eventually I was able to gather all the sources they used for this video. All 4 of them. The interesting thing about these sources, though, is that all of them were written by John Rosemond. Every single source linked in this video is just an article written by the guy doing the video. And when I say article, I don't mean research article published in a reputable psychology journal. I mean local news op-ed without any quotes, citations, or links to studies. When I read through the articles, it was just more of the same, more parenting advice built on the claim that obedient children are happy children, and that the way to get obedience is through exerting unquestionable authority and demanding respect. Only one of the articles had anything approximating a scholarly source. There were no quotes or study titles, But there were two names that Rosemond said to Google if we wanted to find out more. Nice citation, John. Anyway, those names were Diana Baumrind and Robert Larzalere, and apparently these people represent the best research and prove that the happiest kids are those who obey their parents and teachers. So I Googled them, and I also Googled John Rosemond for good measure just to see what came up, and here's what I found. Diana Baumrind is actually pretty well known in the psychology and parenting spheres. In the 60s, she came up with the idea that parenting styles can be distilled down into 3 specific types: permissive, authoritarian, and authoritative. And the type of parenting you use can have some pretty significant impacts on how your child turns out. This theory has been called into question by a lot of contemporary psychologists who consider Baumrind's work reductive and flawed in its methodology. These flaws in data collection and the extrapolations she draws from this limited data mean that her work, as popular and mainstream as it became, is just not grounded in good science. On top of that, her more recent work is a lot more radical, and she's even published an article including the suggestion that the parent who expresses love unconditionally is encouraging the child to be selfish and demanding. So her theories are outdated and debunked, and she just generally has some shitty ideas about parenting. Now, Robert Larzalere has published a lot of research, and he's associated with the American College of Pediatricians. Both of those things sound great, right? Well, most of his articles are about why spanking your kids is good, actually. There are lots of studies debunking his work and pointing out the flaws in his analysis, so I won't go into that here, but suffice it to say, he advocates for what most other parenting scholars consider child abuse. I'll link some of those studies in the description if you want to look into the specifics yourself. Now, the American College of Pediatricians sounds official, and you'd be forgiven for thinking that it is. But the actual leading organization for pediatricians is the American Academy of Pediatrics. The American College of Pediatricians, on the other hand, is known for having very conservative positions, including being pro-spanking, pro-life, anti-LGBTQ, anti-comprehensive sex ed, and, oh yeah, it's cited by the Southern Poverty Law Center as being a hate group for its positions on conversion therapy, the adoption of children by gay couples, and trans rights. Guess who else is associated with the American College of Pediatricians? Oh look, it's John Rosemond! So far, we've seen that his sources are a little, let's say, questionable. But what about John himself? Well, I looked into it, and it's not great. In fact, there's so much that's not great that I'm going to need a numbered list to keep everything straight. Now, this might be petty, but John Rosemond isn't a psychologist. The state of North Carolina legally allows him to call himself a psychologist, but he isn't one. He's a psychological associate. Most states require you to have a doctorate to get your license that allows you to call yourself a psychologist, but Mr. Rosemond doesn't have a doctorate and happens to live in a state that doesn't have this specific stipulation, so while he is technically allowed to call himself a psychologist, just keep in mind that really he's a psychological associate. While John clings to the title psychologist, ironically, he also kind of hates other psychologists. Anytime he's given the opportunity, he trash talks the entire field of psychology. He talks about experts and theory and professional parenting babblers, all in the heaviest of scare quotes. On top of that, he thinks a lot of their ideas that are well substantiated by decades of research, mind you, are just fake. Like ADHD, he thinks it just doesn't exist. Part of this disdain for the field comes from the fact that he uses biblical psychology in his practice. As his website states, John does not test, diagnose, or recommend medication. Furthermore, although he is a psychologist, John does not employ psychological principles in counseling with parents. His advice is based on biblical principles, as well as parenting tradition and common sense. He speaks with parents only, and does not consult with parents if they or the child in question are actively seeking another therapist. I think this one pretty much speaks for itself. This disdain for psychology doesn't stop at his own views. John has a whole legion of employees, and most of them are not really qualified in the traditional sense. If you look at his team, he has a lot of people who have experience as educators and parents. Some have degrees in psychology and education. But only one, Gretchen Slover, has a doctorate. And it says here she got her PsyD from Southern California Seminary. Seminary? She got a doctoral degree in psychology from a seminary school? And before you ask, no, this school isn't accredited by the APA. I checked. So John Rosemond has one psychology expert on his team, and they got their PsyD from an unaccredited seminary school. Let's move on. Now, this is where the big stuff comes in. All of the stuff I mentioned wouldn't really matter if this were just some guy, but he isn't. This is a man with speaking engagements and book deals, and he's on PragerU with millions of views, and his advice has the potential to possibly do real damage to children. John's solutions to behavior problems range from the aforementioned firm language to wild, terrifying stuff. For instance, when he was asked by a parent what to do about a 5-year-old who had hit her mom, he told her to confine her daughter to her very nice and comfortable room for a month. The operative principle: if a consequence does not establish a permanent memory, it's been a waste of time and effort. One thing is certain: at age 70, she will remember being in her room for a month when she was 5. She will also remember that she never hit her mother again. Much of his theory of psychology rests on the idea that a punishment must establish a permanent memory. This is concerning not just because that's literally what trauma is, but because John's understanding of how memory and trauma work is troubling. For instance, in 1992, he argued that an 18-month-old girl who had been sexually abused didn't need therapy because she wouldn't remember the event. Except this goes against everything that psychologists, even 30 years ago, know about how trauma, even at a very young age, permanently affects the brain. He was widely criticized for this, but he seems to still hold on to unfounded and potentially harmful ideas about trauma and memory and just how the brain works. Which, isn't a good thing when your whole job rests on understanding how brains work. So, let's sum up what we found. Mr. John Rosemond is a psychological associate, not psychologist, who believes the entire field of psychology is full of fake scientists studying fake issues, all while advocating for practices that most actual psychologists consider child abuse, and surrounding himself with unaccredited faux experts. His theories come from 1, a woman who says you shouldn't give your children unconditional love, and 2, a man who publishes articles on why parents should hit their children, and is a member of an SPLC certified hate group, which also counts John himself among its members. And this is the guy PragerU decided should come on and give parenting advice. PragerU, what the Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. This one was a lot of fun to put together. Dunking on PragerU is like junk food. It's super enjoyable, but maybe not actually hearty or useful. But let me know if you would like me to do more videos like this in the future. This video was brought to you by the patrons whose names are scrolling across the screen right now, and I'd like to give a huge thank you to the eldritch abominations known as Zauber, Sigwa, A Tasty Snack, and Comrade Fox. And until next time, stay safe, stay warm, and I will see y'all again soon, I hope. Bye, folks. Oh, and did I mention this guy's running for president in 2024 if Trump doesn't run? Wild. Absolutely fucking wild. I couldn't make this shit up if I tried.